to Wixell as the two prepared to take their respective watches. "It looks as though the first action would come while we're on duty. I've got just one favor to ask. If you have to economize on power, let number one alone, will you?" "No fear of that," Wixell hissed, with the Vorkulian equivalent of a chuckle. "We have abundance of power for all of your projector officers. But don't waste any of it, or I'll cut you down 5 ratings." "You're welcome. When I shine old number one on any hexen work, one flash is all they'll take. See you at supper." And, leaving his superior at the door of the power room, Cremodior wriggled away to his station upon the parallel horizontal bars before his panel. Making sure that his tail coils were so firmly clamped that no possible lurch or shock could throw him out of position, he set an eye toward each of his sighting screens, even though he knew that it would be long before those comparatively short-range instruments would show anything except friendly vessels. Then, ready for any emergency, he scanned his one live screen, the one upon which were being flashed the pictures and reports secured by the high-powered instruments of the observers. With the terrific acceleration employed by the Hexen spheres, it was not long until the leading squadron of fighting globes neared the Vorkulian war cone. This advance guard was composed of the new, high-acceleration vessels. Their crews, with the innate bloodlust and savagery of their breed, had not even entertained the thought of accommodating their swifter pace to that of the main body of the fleet. These vast, slow-moving structures were no more to be feared than those similar ones whose visits they had been repulsing for 20 long Jovian years. By the time the slower spheres could arrive upon the scene, there would be nothing left for them to do. Therefore, few in number as were the vessels of the vanguard, they rushed to the attack. In one blinding salvo, they launched their supposedly irresistible planes of force. Dazzling, scintillating planes under whose fierce power the studying, questing, scouting fortresses previously encountered had fled back southward, cut, beaten, and crippled. These spiraling monsters, however, did not pause or waver in their stolidly ordered motion. As the Hexen planes of force flashed out, the dull green metal walls broke into a sparkling green radiance, against which the titanic bolts spent themselves in vain. Then there leaped out from the weird brilliance of the walls of the fortresses great shafts of pale green luminescence, tractor ray after gigantic tractor ray, which seized upon the Hexen spheres and drew them ruthlessly into the yawning open end of that gigantic cone. Then, in each group of 7, similar great streamers of energy reached out from fortress to fortress, until each group was welded into one mighty unit by 21 such bands of force. The unit formed, a ray from each of its 7 component structures seized upon a designated sphere, and under the combined power of those 7 tractors, the luckless globe was literally snapped into the center of mass of the Vorkulian unit. There, 7 dully gleaming red pressor rays leaped upon it, backed by all the power of 7 gigantic fortresses, held rigidly in formation by the unimaginable mass of the structures and by their 21 prodigious tractor beams. Under that awful impact, the screens and walls of the Hexen spheres were exactly as effective as so many structures of the most tenuous vapor. The red glare of the vortex of those beams was lightened momentarily by a flash of brighter color, and through the foggy atmosphere there may have flamed briefly a drop or two of metal that was only liquefied. The red and green beams snapped out, the peculiar radiance died from the metal walls, and the gigantic duplex cone of the Vorkuls bored serenely northward, as little marked or affected by the episode as is a darting swift who, having snapped up a chance insect in full flight, darts on. Great cat! Far off in space, Brandon turned from his Visiray screen and wiped his brow. Gazov certainly chirped it, Perce, when he called those things flying fortresses. But who, what, why, and how? We didn't see any apparatus that looked capable of generating or handling those beams, and, of course, when they got started, their screens cut us off at the pockets. Wish we could have made some sense out of their language. Like to know a few of their ideas. Find out whether we can't get on terms with them some way or other. Funny-looking wampuses, but they've got real brains. Their think tanks are very evidently full of bubbles. If they have it in mind to take us on next, old son, it'll be just too bad." "And then some," agreed Stevens. "They've got something, no fooling. It looks like the Hexans are going to get theirs, good and plenty, pretty soon. And then what? I'd give my left lung and 4 front teeth for one long look at their controls in action." "You and me both. It's funny, the way those green ray screens stick to the walls, instead of being spherical as you'd expect. Should think they'd have to radiate from a center, and so be spherical," Brandon cogitated. "However, we've got nothing corkscrewy enough to go through them, so we'll have to stand by. We'll stay inside whenever possible, look on from outside when we must, but all the time picking up whatever information we can. In the meantime, now that we've got our passengers, old Dr. Westfall prescribed something that he says is good for what ails us. Distance, lots of distance, straight out from the sun. And I wouldn't wonder if we'd better take his prescription." The 2 terrestrial observers relapsed into silence, staring into their visiray plates, searching throughout the enormous volume of one of those great fortresses in another attempt to solve the mystery of the generation and propagation of the incredible manifestations of energy which they had just witnessed. Scarcely had the search begun, however, when the visirays were again cut off sharply. The rapidly advancing main fleet of the Hexans had arrived, and the scintillant Vorkulian screens were again in place. True to Hexan nature, training, and tradition, the fleet, 100 strong, rushed savagely to the attack. Above, below, and around the far-flung cone, the furious globes dashed, attacking every Vorkulian craft viciously with every resource at their command, with every weapon known to their diabolically destructive race. Planes of force stabbed and slashed, concentrated beams of annihilation flared fiercely through the reeking atmosphere. Gigantic aerial bombs and torpedoes were hurled with full radio control against the unwelcome visitor, with no effect. Bound together in groups of 7 by the mighty pale-green bands of force, the Vorkulian units sailed calmly northward, spiraling along with not the slightest change in formation or velocity. The frightful planes and beams of immeasurable power simply spent themselves harmlessly against those sparklingly radiant green walls, seemingly as absorbent to energy as a sponge is to water, since the eye could not detect any change in the appearance of the screens, under even the fiercest blasts of the Hexan projectors. Bombs, torpedoes, and all material projectiles were equally futile. They exploded harmlessly in the air far from their objectives, or disappeared at the touch of one of those dark, dull-red pressor rays. And swiftly, but calmly and methodically, as at a Vorkulian practice drill, the heptagons were destroying the Hexan fleet. 7 mighty green tractors would lash out, seize an attacking sphere, and snap it into the center of mass of the unit of 7. There would be a brief flash of dull red, a still briefer flare of incandescence, and the impalpable magnets would leap out to seize another of the doomed globes. It was only a matter of moments until not a Hexan vessel remained, and the Vorkulian juggernaut spiraled onward, now at full acceleration, toward the Hexan stronghold, dimly visible far ahead of them, a vast city built around Jupiter's northern pole. At the controls of his projector, Chromodier spun a dial with a many-fingered, flexible hand and spoke. "Wixale, I am being watched again. I can feel very plainly that strange intelligence watching everything I do. Have the tracers located him?" "No, they haven't been able to synchronize with his wave yet. Either he is using a most minute pencil, or, what is more probable, he is on a frequency which we do not ordinarily use. However, I agree with you that it is not a malignant intelligence. All of us have felt it, and none of us senses enmity. Therefore, it is not a Hexan. It may be one of those strange creatures of the satellites, who are, of course, perfectly harmless." "Harmless, but unpleasant," returned Chromodior.